maturity, capabilities, outcomes, and the core dimensions around that is you've got to think of the governance, right? The complexity of the department, the professionalism, what controls they have.
Welcome to Actualizing Success. In this podcast series, our in-house advisors discuss today's finance and technology topics with an emphasis on solutions that embrace tomorrow.
Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Actualizing Success and a new issue, which is somewhat of a retread of an earlier issue that Louise and I did, tracking Louise's journey into consulting. I'm going to say we did this 60 days ago, Louise, because the first one was called 60 Days into Consulting, and we're nothing if not original. So today is 120 days into consulting. So let's kick into it, Louise, and I'm going to start off 120 days in. Same question we asked before, but seeing how your questions evolved, how has your perspective changed from the operating execution side into advisory and consulting?
Well, hi, Paul, again. Thank you for your time. It's always great to chat. Moving from execution in Treasury operations to diagnosing, advising, and designing solutions, I have managed to focus more on, I would say, identifying the root cause rather than the symptoms, challenging clients' assumptions, of course, with diplomacy, and balancing what I think is the ideal state, Treasury operation, with what is practically achievable and the steps needed to get there. So basically, this has expanded my strategic mindset far beyond the day-to-day focus on actual Treasury practitioner tasks.
Very cool. And I know we talked about this offline, shall we say, away from the record, but you kind of had this one, like a big part of your career with one company and their problems, and now it's like different companies and different views on the same problem or different problems. So yeah, it's kind of cool. And I guess picking up on that theme, what have you then learned, if you like, about that balance of strategic advice versus the kind of practical constraints that our clients have?
Well, it's really helped working with different clients. And it has taught me how to, I think the most important thing is to build trust rapidly, listening to what was not really said, and adapting solutions to varying Treasury departments in their maturity levels. Okay, so it's very important to be able to understand the various maturity levels. And of course, prioritizing recommendations, because you can always go on and on and on with all the recommendations, but what you kind of need to concentrate more is on quick wins and the right recommendation for that Treasury department.
Yeah, quick wins is something we talk about a lot when you're sort of trying to prove yourself, being able to kind of actualize. See what I've done there? Something of immediate value to the client. Wanting to go back to one thing that you said at the start of that answer, what have you learned about the point of building trust quickly with our clients?
So this has been quite interesting. I think what's really helped is to avoid speaking in consulting jargon and really, talking the Treasury language. I think that really has made trust be built a lot faster when I'm communicating to the departments and providing an early diagnosis, I think, with, like I said, a quick win has certainly helped a lot. And one other thing that I've had to master was listen more. I don't have to make decisions on the spur of the moment. So I'm listening more and then recommending solutions. But for me, the most important one has been transparency. Like, being able to tell the client right from the word get-go what is achievable and what is not achievable.
Yeah, I think, again, I think we talked about this last time, that all this background that you've had gives you a credibility that goes along with the practical points. The thing I really also liked, because I had this conversation literally 3 hours ago, was about speaking in Treasury language, not kind of consulting speak, or what I was thinking about earlier, helping a TMS vendor, was sort of trying to give them advice to not speak in software terms and to try and like play it back in operating terms. So I really like that point as well. The other thing that comes across, I guess, and like linking to the next question, have you sort of seen reoccurring pain points in these conversations that you've been having? Going back to that idea of not just your one client experience, but all the clients we're speaking to?
Mm-hmm. Well, I must say, being able to work across multiple clients has certainly helped identify common themes. Themes like fragmented banking structures, manual cash forecasting, lack of concentration of cash, or visibility of cash, weak controls around payments. I see come up quite a bit. And of course, outdated or underutilized TMS systems. So seeing these patterns across all the clients has actually helped me anticipate the client's needs really early on into the consulting scheme. So it's actually accelerated analysis quite a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I use this phrase a lot, that sort of no TMS system is perfect. The ones we look at, they've all sort of designed from a perspective, they're all really good at something or multiple things, but I refuse to believe one system can be perfect at everything. But it is true, when we do with a particular system, and not to name any, but like you see the same issues because of the limitations in that software. So getting to solve that again and again does sort of help accelerate, as you say, can almost anticipate where it's going, because we've seen that before. Cool. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So next question. This is sort of back to this theme of 120 days in. What, if you think about things you've learned, what tools and methodologies have you now sort of adapted in our sort of Actualize methodology in consulting that you didn't see maybe from before?
Well, I must say in the 120 days plus that I have learned some very essential things, specifically around structured consulting approaches.
Right.
You have to be structured in key areas, like earlier on is scoping. We've got to make sure we really scope correctly the project before we get into it. This avoids the scope creep that tends to come up like halfway through the project or earlier on in the project. Stakeholder analysis is something that I think has taught me a lot to do more of, and planning, a lot of communication around planning, managing deadlines, both internally for our teams, as well as the actual client teams, and defining timelines. I've been doing that a lot lately, defining timelines, making sure everybody is aware of when things have to fall into place. So a lot of these things have come across the different projects that, I have developed over time and weren't very clear to me as a practitioner.
We've got, I think one of the things we do well as Actualize is sort of learn our lessons and sort of feel like everything we do goes back into our templates. In particular, if you think about design and scope and requirements, that point into our kind of POC framework. I'm doing a project at the moment with big blueprints. That's the way the vendor wants to work. And it's kind of interesting to me, our methodology, how I think, of course, I'm going to say this, but how I think what we do gives us a little bit more structure and breaks things down. And I think scope creep is kind of the killer for budget and timelines. So no, I'm with you there.
Yeah, both for us and for the client, right?
Yeah,
so you really need to avoid it. Yeah.
And again, it goes back to that sort of concept of quick wins, that doing those things with structure lets us get to an endpoint quicker. Particularly something with a vendor with a client that maybe hasn't done this sort of thing recently, that we can get something delivered quickly. That really helps in a structured way. Very cool. Okay, next topic. Thinking again about this sort of journey. And we talked a little bit about pain points, but what if we flip that question a little bit and say, what kind of platform or trends have you sort of noticed in our industry? And what do you think about sort of technology adaptation in that sense?
Well, I have seen a big acceleration towards Treasury digitalization. No doubt about that, adding TMSs, upgrading TMSs, changing TMSs. A lot of API-based bank connectivity coming up, quite a lot. Solution automations, cloud-based systems, and reconciliations has come up quite a bit in the second half of the year, mostly. Reconciliation, better reporting. I think generally clients are increasingly want to have less manual touch points and more real-time information.
Yeah, a few things in there to pick up. Certainly that digitalization. We wrote a paper not that long ago about sort of the fourth age, if you like, of systems. I like all this stuff. I'm a data nerd, as you know, but sort of that digitalization, because the technology barrier is so much lower. I agree with you. I really see that. And the other thing you said, which I see as well, is that trend of TMS change. I think the barrier to changing systems is a lot less than it used to be. So where you might have had we kind of bought it, we're stuck with it. I think being able to kind of take pieces on, and I think that goes hand in hand with the rise of APIs, that you can maybe start to think of TMSs rather than just one thing, but a set of services, be able to kind of pull off and take one aspect of it into another system. I think we'll start to see that trend. We certainly do a lot internally on sort of APIs, or APIs has allowed us to do things around the edges of these kind of core TMS systems. I agree with you. I think that's a trend that's going to.
And this has also helped the API. The development of the API has also helped clients make those decisions and change their TMSs quicker, because it's so much easier to connect their banks. And also, let's face it, there's so many companies now, so many software options around the TMS space than there were 10 years ago. So you have more choice, and you can customize your choice to your needs. So I think people are getting less resistant to change than they were before.
Yeah, 100%. And then the other thing sort of with being cloud-based is, essentially people are now leasing software rather than buying software. As an ex-software kind of TMS software guy myself earlier in my career, there was almost a sense of, well, it's in now, great, client stuck with it, and actually that isn't the case. So in fact, one thing, again, we won't name names, but one of our kind of bigger clients that's on that old traditional bought it, installed it, we probably will get them off that onto a more shall we say, the new world of leased cloudware stuff, just because that barrier to switch isn't anywhere near what it was before. So yeah, very cool. Okay, so 2 questions ago, Louise. We're staying in there. Next one, energy, and we've got to talk about this because it's New Year, and we were just saying off mic how energized we were. So we'll drag everyone still listening, because they're still excited about this podcasting. So, what part of consulting have energized you the most? And for balance, maybe I should also ask, any that have drained you? And I might know the answer to this that you're going to say.
Yeah,
But
I think drained is a bit of a harsh word, but let's start with the energized because I like that. It's the beginning of the year. We're trying to energize our teams. We're trying to energize our clients. I've seen a good start from our clients, a lot of energy. It's a new year. We got to, get more involved in our projects. So let's keep the momentum. I think one of the things that have energized me a lot is the variety of clients, the variety of problems. Working with different clients in different industries, working with different maturity levels in the different treasury departments, the landscapes and the variety of challenges that everyone faces. It's different, it's different. You can't say there's two companies that are going through the same thing. Every client brings a new puzzle and keeps the work intellectually stimulating. It's also been very rewarding that when subconsciously, without noticing, I kind of reference to my 25 years of Treasury practitioner experience when I say, oh, I've kind of faced that before, that problem you're mentioning. This is how we solve it. And this builds confidence for me as an individual, and it makes the work a lot fulfilling. But I think the biggest reward is the transformation. When you see the companies transforming, changing, evolving, and seeing how the organization has changed. They changed the way they see their day-to-day jobs, changed the way they look at what they do. Part of that is very motivating, I have to say. I'm really excited about this role, and I'm really looking forward to more challenges. So I suppose I have to answer the draining part. I think the draining part is probably just, having to manage different projects at the same time and at different deadlines. That is certainly a challenge. And the deliverables, trying to always deliver the best in class consulting, exceptional work from the team, and I haven't been disappointed up to now. So I love the energy we have in the company and the team and the spirit and, the go-getting kind of outlook. But I can't avoid mentioning the administrative low-value work we have to do in our job. But yeah, overall, it's been very exciting.
Yeah, it's a necessary evil. I don't think any of us, wake up thinking, "Right, I'm so excited to check my budget," but we do it and we stay on top of it. I was thinking that something that our boss Chad says to us, it's like relentless execution always, right? And it can be a bit draining, but it's also, I think, ingrained in all of us. So we just do it. One thing you didn't say that I was going to ask you about is that variety. Last year, variety also went into geography for us.
Yes.
Where you and I sit physically in Europe, but we do a lot now with Asia Pacific with our new office and getting into that. That feels energizing to me. It sort of adds to that sort of variety, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. The reason why I didn't mention it is because I worked in a multinational who had all the regions. So it's like second nature for me. It's like just part of the plan, part of the day.
But it is fun, right? That we, as Europeans, get to sit across, right? We kind of sit. I always think we sit in the middle, right? Start of the day, we connect with our kind of colleagues in Malaysia office, and towards the end of the day, we connect with our colleagues in the US. I kind of like that about that. One other thing I wanted to say about your point of the variety, and something I think we celebrate as Actualize a lot, is kudos. And I think it's always cool, as many years as I've been doing this, when you get those emails from your clients saying, "Thank you, great job, you've really helped us transform," as you say, see the fruits of what you do. That is kind of cool. And it's the 6th of January and already had one from one client. So,
well done, Paul. Yeah. Well done.
She might have been on holiday over Christmas and just got around to sending it now, but we'll take the win. It's all good.
Yeah.
Right. Last question, Louise. So we'll call it a bit of a summary. And again, it's something you mentioned earlier on in the conversation about quick wins, because it's something that we do a lot of. when we do our kind of health checks. But is there anything you've learned about sort of that process of benchmarking that we do with our Treasury organizations?
Benchmarking Treasury organizations across different industries, I think it's very essential to measure like with like, right? We've got to be very careful when we do that kind of benchmarking, because we do get that question, right? Especially with the slightly immature Treasury departments, like what is other people doing and what do you recommend? So we've got to be really careful. And I think what works best is to start with companies. Like when I mean what's like for like in comparison is like the company size is very important, right? The complexity, the capital structure of each client, right? The regulatory environment that they're in, the operational model is also very important. So when I try and benchmark what's best practice, which is what we largely do, right? We not just implement software, we also advise a lot and we advise what's best practice. It's always good to compare like with like in those 4 big buckets. So I think it's very important is always looking at the maturity of the Treasury Department, the capabilities of that Treasury Department. I mean, you got to be able to compare that before you benchmark and before you provide best practice, and also what the outcome is that everybody's seeking to do. And there's a lot of core dimensions around those 3 things. So I mentioned maturity, capabilities, outcomes, and the core dimensions around that is you've got to think of the governance, right? The complexity of the department, the professionalism, what controls they have. Is it centralized? Is it a decentralized company around the Treasury function? The technology that they have at their fingertips, the data, what kind of data do they get it? Where do they get it from? The credibility of the data and performance as well, and value proposition. I mean, what is the Treasury Department really providing to the rest of the team? The value proposition of that department. So best-in-class Treasury departments tend to look similar. They tend to have those 3 cores. They look similar. It's easy to identify, and they don't necessarily have to be in the same sector. So this is how I would do it.
Yeah, we're a audio podcast, Louise, but for you and I can see this, but I'm holding up a Rubik's Cube because as you were talking about it, I was thinking about dimensions because that's how I think about it as well. And I think you're right. It sometimes can be a bit lazy to just sort of say, oh, well, that client is in healthcare, so therefore we'll just compare them with this other client. Last project that we did on healthcare, I think it cuts a lot deeper, and sometimes the best kind of prior example is not actually in the same industry, but because of all those other factors that kind of make them comparable. We're at about, I think, 500 clients in our sort of, I mean, obviously not active at the time, but we've dealt with. So we do have this sort of quite vast database that we can tap into when we hit those problems. Not to say your memory isn't flawless, Louise, but you know what I mean? Like we get to kind of pull on all of those things for comparisons. That, I think, brings us to the end of kind of what we'd wanted to cover today, Q&A wise. So, Louise, as ever, I always love these conversations. We'll book ourselves in for another 60 or 120 days, and we roll on for the rest of the year. So thanks again, Louise.
Thank you, Paul. It's always nice chatting with you. Thank you for the opportunity. And yeah, let's see if we get some favoritism. Maybe we'll do another one.
We can but hope. All right. Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Actualizing Success. Make sure to visit us online at www.actualizeconsulting.com, where you can explore our service offerings. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or your preferred platform. If you've enjoyed what we talked about today, please consider leaving a review and following us on LinkedIn. If you have any questions or would like to share your opinions with us, please send us a note at podcast@actualizeconsulting.com. We look forward to hearing from you.